Mr. Chun, I'd like to start with you. Back in the 90s, when we were debating whether or not to grant China permanent normal trade relations and end the Jackson-Vanik debate every year, I believed at that time that by more constructively engaging economically with China and having a stronger U.S. presence in China, that someday some of the things that vexed us the most would change, namely human rights, that they would get better, and that things like intellectual property rights would, if they were accepted into the WTO, would get better. I've been wrong. In fact, most of those things have never materialized. In fact, the human rights situation, it appears to me, while there have been times when I thought it was getting better, it seems to me that under this current president, China's taken a big step backward. I believe Deng Xiaoping had a vision of economic openness, but I think that maybe even he believed that it would yield more personal freedoms as well. It doesn't seem to be happening. First, can you tell me what are the most egregious affronts to human rights that are happening in China right now, and what can we do to be more of a positive influence to get changes in those areas? Also, would you agree that with President Xi Jinping, this president, that human rights situation has actually gotten worse?
我觉得呢，中国实际上那个时候给了这个大家有一种说法，就是中国经济发展了，那么就会民主化。我觉得实际上我们看到这个说法在中国并没有实现，相反，这种美国的很多企业到中国去做生意呢，结果把中共的那些坏毛病学到手里了。
During those days of debate, that people believe that economic integration or opening to China will help improve eventually the human rights conditions there. But actually, we see the fact that during those years that American doing business in China and those business and they learned those bad things from the communist regime there actually.
所以呢，我觉得实际上中国真正这种官民力量发生对比的变化，恰恰是当互联网的发展，以及当美国很多民间机构开发出这个破网软件以后，真正让中国很多侵犯人权的案例能够公布于世。
What I saw the game change is when we have a kind of software that could break down China's the cyber war, the firewall. And then there are some cases of human rights violation in China has been exposed to the outside world.
Dr. Kennedy, I'd like to talk to you just a little bit about China's economy, the stock market. You addressed a lot of the issues in your opening statement. On August 24th, 2015, the Shanghai stock market index fell 8.49%, followed by 7% on the following day. At that time, the Chinese government took really controversial measures to try to minimize the damage. During his visit, President Xi defended his response to the stock market crash as needed to prevent mass panic. Some analysts predict additional China stock market falls in the future. Is their economy slowing faster than analysts predicted? I know that you said in your opening statement that 7% is probably robust, probably a little optimistic, but is it slowing faster than analysts predicted? And do you think that China will continue to manipulate their stock market? And do you think that's a good idea for China's economy? Does it really stop panic, or does it actually stop future investment? And then finally, what cost does the market manipulation impose on U.S. and global markets?
It's a terrific question. I think that growth has slowed more than people expected it would because they didn't realize how significant the anti-corruption campaign would have on growth. That's the biggest contractionary policy in China today. And it's more important than just simply having less credit into the system. Actually, this is much more important overall. And in fact, if they announced an end to the anti-corruption campaign today, investment would pick up tomorrow. So it's not the weight of debt. It's really this politically induced contraction because they feel that's the way to restructure their economy. So beside that, you know, because they cracked down on investment in real estate, all that money flooded into the stock market. So the problem with the intervention isn't July, it's June 2014, and since what we saw was just the most obvious because it was about stemming the collapse and the popping of the bubble. When President Xi was here and in his statement in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere talked about the systemic risk, it's the first time they ever mentioned systemic risk as a justification for intervention. China's stock market only accounts for about 5% of total financing in China. The Chinese stock market could disappear, and China would still have the same financial system essentially. So I think that's really a post hoc justification for an addiction to intervention. That because state-owned companies were losing money and people were worried about, the Chinese government was worried about their reputational hit that they would take by so many folks losing money, even though all they lost was the run-up in the year before. The intervention that they had was poorly timed, executed, and has resulted in a loss of confidence from investors, domestic Chinese investors and foreign investors, combined with the bungled adjustment of the renminbi's setting and the depreciation. There's great concerns going forward. When you're managing the economy that's primarily a real economy where you've got investments made over months and years, investors will move much more slowly. But now that you're talking about securities markets and a somewhat open capital account, this loss of confidence actually can change the direction of the economy in seconds just simply by us pushing a button, by selling renminbi or whatever. And that volatility will affect us more and more. So the most disappointment I had from his visit, maybe the president talked about this with President Obama privately, is they didn't explain really what that systemic risk supposedly was and why the way they decided to intervene was the best way. And they didn't restore confidence among the investment community at all. So I still think they're in a much worse position than they were several months ago.
Thanks. Mr. Rohrbacher.